Senior Assistant Deputy Manager of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities of Canada. Let's also welcome Mr. Matthew Baldwin, Head of the Housing Task Force and Deputy Director General at the European Commission. Aide Marquesa Masica Bello, Vice Minister of Housing of Colombia. Mr. Ming Zhang, Global Director for Urban, Subnational Finance, Tourism and Disaster Management at the World Bank. And let's also welcome His Worship Councillor Sakaria Unona, Mayor of Vindhoek, capital of Namibia. And last but certainly not least, Jonathan Redford, CEO of Habitat for Humanity International. Welcome to you all. It's really lovely to have you here with us. And before we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, this event is also yours, and we really are keen to hear what you have to say. So in a second, a QR code will be on the screen right behind me. Please have your phones ready, because when the time is right, we will ask you to log in ROV, which is a system that UN Habitat has put together. And through this, you'll be able to share your questions, your comments. So listen very carefully, but also comment very carefully online, and we'll go back to you at the end of our second panel. And also another note, one of our panelists here will be speaking in Spanish, so if you are not fluent in Spanish, please have your headsets ready as well. It's a little heads up. So let me start with you, Your Excellency. So given your deep oversight in Canada, how can housing be more systematically integrated into the overall political agendas of the G7, G20, G77 and BRICS to achieve the SDGs, especially SDG target 11.1 globally, please?
Thank you very much for the question. So housing is not just a social issue, it's a fundamental to economic growth, productivity, health, and climate resilience, and it must be treated as a core priority across G7 and G20 agendas. G7 and G20 leaders can elevate housing affordability and homelessness as shared global priorities by reflecting them in leaders' declarations and advancing ministerial work to develop common approaches for measuring need and tracking progress on housing adequacy, affordability, and access to basic services. Establishing housing as a standing item within infrastructure, finance, sustainable development discussions would help drive sustained, coordinated action. And advancing common indicators and reporting frameworks, such as UN Habitat's efforts to define and measure homelessness, would strengthen global accountability. Canada's experience shows the value in clear definitions, such as core housing need, to identify households in unaffordable, overcrowded, or inadequate housing, and better target policy responses aligned with SDG 11. Canada's systems-based homelessness approach to homelessness offers a replicable model. Through Reaching Home, Canada's main federal homelessness program, we support data-driven, community-led housing first responses by supporting communities to implement outcomes-based approaches and coordinated access to homelessness services. Reaching Home ensures that there are no wrong doors for people seeking help, so that they can be connected with appropriate housing solutions. While the causes of homelessness are varied and complex, at its core is a lack of safe, adequate, and affordable housing. The solutions are clear: the use of public land to unlock affordable housing, blended finance models that provide low-cost concessional lending to de-risk investments and crowd in private and institutional investment, investing in modern methods of construction to reduce costs, build faster, and support climate goals, just to name a few. Scaling up collaboration with multilateral organizations, institutional investors, philanthropic organizations, and the private sector will be essential to mobilize the capital needed to deliver housing at space and at scale. Governments must continue to act as an enabler and a catalyst for innovation and support people-centered approaches to creating complete and inclusive communities where people can work, live, and thrive. The G7 and G20 forums provide opportunities for countries to come together to discuss lessons learned, to make shared commitments to action, and to hold each other accountable for making meaningful progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So bringing that global political agenda down to structured frameworks is absolutely crucial, like you mentioned. But let me turn to you now, Matthew Baldwin. Let's look at the European lens after Canada. So how can the European Commission help translate growing political recognition of housing within global coalitions into concrete, scalable financing solutions that deliver affordable and climate-resilient housing at scale, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. That's a complicated question. I'll do my best. Thank you very much for inviting us here. I'd like to begin by firstly saying, following what Janet has said, it's critically important that housing is now arriving finally at the core of the G7, the G20, the G77 agendas. Why? Because we all know that it is a quintessential, cross-cutting topic for supporting jobs and growth. We look at this in Europe through the perspective of competitiveness, short-term competitiveness. In my first week in the job, the Director General of Confindustria, the Italian business organization, burst through my door and he said, I need you to deliver on housing because we can't recruit, and we can't recruit because there's no housing for people. That's the biggest single priority. And that is the reality. People are unable to live where the jobs are. That's the new factor that housing has been troubling the most vulnerable in our communities forever, but now it's biting on our economies and our jobs and growth in a really significant way. In a longer term perspective, average age of people being able to leave home in the European Union, anybody, it's getting north of 30. But simply because people can't afford to set up on their own. So it's driving negative demographic change as well. So this is critical, and we now need to help bring political recognition of housing as this quintessential topic to the core of our agendas. It's critical for reasons you know well, so let me rattle through some of the reasons. For affordability and accessibility reasons. Sometimes you just can't get access to a house or a home. It's critical in the context of cities. We know the problems, at least in Europe, are concentrated there, and it focuses again on the young people and the most vulnerable in our communities in those cities. And in a way it's convenient because if there's one place that is capable of addressing those cities, and I'm looking at Michaela from Vienna there, in a fundamental way, in a hands-on way, whether it's climate change, whether it's urban mobility problems, or it's housing, cities are capable of doing it, and we should empower them to do so. So this perfect storm is actually an opportunity, if we turn it around, to bring affordable and quality housing within the range of everybody, particularly let's think about young people. Two, as you say, deliver on the resilience side to bring down emissions from our buildings, to start to realize improvements in sustainable mobility or transit, broadening the catchment area through which we look at the prism of affordable housing and relating it to jobs. But once again, I just want to underline making that housing question central to all of our political agendas. If there's one thing we can take from the session, I'd stress that. Sorry, to finally come quickly to your question, how do we drive this in terms of funding and finance solutions? We have now published in the European Commission the first ever European Affordable Housing Plan in December. Please take a look if you're interested. It's our attempt to add European value to the responsibilities of member states, and regions, and of course cities to deliver housing. And one of the issues which is bedeviling all of us is the supply of finance. Hence the need for our pan-European investment platform, a pragmatic toolkit to try to bring innovative solutions to maximize the use of our limited public money to leverage in responsible private capital. For example, how do we best design revolving funds? How do we best do blending of grants and loans? How do we think about housing bonds, which many of you in cities are addressing those issues? Let's get together, establish the best practices, and find ways of advancing on those different things. And this will be particularly crucial as we come to the next EU financial framework, which will operate from 2027. And we very much hope to see the tools, again, we've offered in our proposals for that financial framework, taken up by the member states, taken up by the Parliament, to deliver the maximum possible for housing in that context. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Matthew. So this perfect storm is an opportunity to deliver. Thank you very much for this strong call to action, very visual. Well, let's pause our panel right here because we are honored with the arrival of the assistant to the president of Azerbaijan and head of the foreign policy affairs at the Department of the Presidential Administration, Mr. Hikmat Ajiyev. Please welcome, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also extremely thankful to the distinguished panel. I also express my apologies for being late. There was another commitment. And also, I'm delighted to welcome to all participants to our event called Urban Forum. And despite the calamities of the climate change and of the whims of the weather, I'm glad that as a regular format, our event continues at full swing and with the involvement, participation and engagement of our distinguished delegates. And today's topic is dedicated to one of the important and fundamental issue of the housing and the context of the geopolitics. And I'm extremely glad and privileged to share the experience of Azerbaijan in this field. In the early 90s, Azerbaijan faced immediate war and conflict from the neighboring country where Azerbaijan's 23% territories have been occupied. It has caused one of the biggest humanitarian crises of Europe since the Second World War. In a short period of time, relatively small country Azerbaijan faced with 1 million refugees and IDPs, and all of them have been deprived from the housing and the affordable living conditions. That time, Azerbaijan also faced immediate challenges of the economic problems and difficulties that provided huge challenges for the people and the government of Azerbaijan. And that time we were obliged to provide shelters and tent houses or even tent villages for the refugees without any proper and decent conditions. And even train cars have been used for accommodating 1 million more refugees and IDPs. Therefore, with a housing problem in the context of the geopolitics, in the context of the wars and conflicts, is not a topic so alien to Azerbaijan, specifically in the early 90s. But the government has done is an ultimate goal to provide a shelter and affordable food accessibility and accessibility to the certain commodities for our refugee and IDP community. And since then, we also provided certain government privileges for the IDPs in Azerbaijan. But their immediate demand from the Azerbaijani government was to return back to their homes and within a decent and secure manner. But considering the conditions that we are facing at that time, Azerbaijani government, probably it was also one of the very unique case, provided 300,000 houses and apartments for the Azerbaijani refugees and IDPs, so that to provide them with the proper conditions that they can live in their homes. Because in every language, I believe that there is a translation of this word, my house, my home is my castle. Regardless it's in a big or small, whatever conditions it could be, but my house is my castle. And every person is destined and is entitled to have in its house, or to have in its home, and to have in a roof under which they can live together with their families. With such a philosophy, with such a thinking, we provided such a shelter to our IDP community. But again, a fundamental demand of our refugees and IDPs was to return back to their homes. In the meantime, our challenge of the IDPs and providing them with accommodation is also further hardened and becomes so much difficult with the 300,000 refugees also coming from the Republic of Armenia, but they were also ethnic Azerbaijanis have been expelled from the territory of Armenia. But now, this issue in the past, we are facing the new realities and new housing challenge in the experience of Azerbaijan. But since 2024, war and conflict is over, South Caucasus region is not associated any longer with the wars and conflicts. And for us, it is the past, and Azerbaijan fully restored its territorial integrity and sovereignty. And with the neighboring Armenia, we also initialed peace agreement and in Washington summit that took place in the last year, and it provides a favorable geopolitical condition for ensuring lasting peace and security in the region of the Caucasus. But once we liberated the territories, we have seen completely different picture. It's an unimaginable picture that yesterday my president also mentioned Agdam city, for example. And Agdam city of Azerbaijan, once accommodating 100,000 civilians, is devastated to an extent that it has been considered Hiroshima of the Caucasus. Hiroshima was destroyed by the nuclear weapons, but Agdam city was destroyed as a result of the deliberate actions of taking everything brick by brick. In a sense, 9 cities of Azerbaijan have been almost completely destroyed, and 300 different settlements and villages. We are in the process of returning 1 million refugees and IDPs back home. It's a really gigantic mission in front of the Azerbaijani government, and we are just building the area bigger the size of the state of the Lebanon from the scratch. Even I would call it from the -5, because this area is also contaminated with the landmines. 1.5 million different sorts of landmines and bioxols also contaminated that areas. We are also engaged in a massive demining campaign to ensure safety and security, because in a housing concept, security and safety and decent housing concept is crucially important. But also, once liberating these territories, we try to appeal to the international experience and knowledge from where we can take best knowledge and expertise. Quite frankly, we couldn't have a proper one where we can apply to the models and the realities of Azerbaijan. Certainly, we appreciate, with all due respect, experience of the United Nations and its institutions in other post-conflict situations, but we were not happy with the speed. And also in the UN operations, mainly funding comes from the donor community, and we also know that there is a fatigue in the donor community. But in the case of Azerbaijan, again, that was a task by my president and the leadership of Azerbaijan, was a time. We should do it in a very timely manner, because Azerbaijani IDPs and refugees were waiting for 30 years with the dream of returning back to their homes, and these territories have been liberated. Or within the short period of time, but high quality, dignity, security, the key parameters of our rebuilding and reconstruction effort. Therefore, we design our own model of the post-conflict reconstruction and rebuilding. Again, considering international experience, but again, building Azerbaijan's own model. What we understand under such circumstances is that the key issue is a coordination within the government institutions. And because we also looked at an experience of the Balkans, in my own experience, I also served as the delegation of Azerbaijan to NATO that year, when after the Balkan operations, when NATO and other European institutions engaged, well, in the post-conflict reconstruction and rebuilding, we sometimes ended up, the international community, of duplicating one another's efforts. But in the case of Azerbaijan, it was in one country and one management and administration infrastructure that we can apply, but within the government, coordination is the key. Therefore, my president himself was coordinating everything at the strategic level and giving the appropriate instruction to the government institutions. Again, first, building the infrastructure and providing accessibility to those areas, accompanied with a massive demining campaign that we try to ensure. Nevertheless, we are not immune to the mine incidents that also happens. Since 2020, we have 420 plus different mine incidents in the liberated territories, where civilians are returning back, and one of the first places civilians return back, by the way, they're going to their homes. They're in search of their homes. Most of the time, people return to the post-conflict situation with the dream of finding their homes, but they can't find, because their homes have been destroyed. But unfortunately, the pathways towards their homes have been contaminated with the landmines. And a second place probably they go, a little bit metaphorical probably, they go to the graveyards of their parents, to their loved ones. That pathways are also landmines. But clearing their areas and providing pathway for the civilians so that they can return back to their homes, and building also master plans. Because modern urbanism and modern culture of the urbanism is changing. Therefore, we are also adapting with the liberated territories to the modern standards of the urbanism, but certainly respecting the environmental conditions, because Karabakh and Eastern Zengezur regions have been declared as a green zone by my president, understanding and considering that there is a huge potential of the renewables in those areas, whether it's in a hydro, sun, and some other possibilities for the renewable energy. Currently, Azerbaijan has managed, again, within a short period of time, to build 300 megawatt potential of the renewable potential in the liberated territories. Currently, we are building in 9 cities from the scratch, 300 different settlements. Within the recent 5 years, again, understanding and in the view of the landmine problem, we have managed to ensure secure, dignified return of the 86,000 of Azerbaijanis back to Karabakh and Eastern Zengezur region. And currently, such an amount of the people are working, living, studying in those territories and building their life. Again, housing is a right of everybody, and my house is my castle. Understanding this philosophy, we are building our Karabakh and Eastern Zengezur region. And Azerbaijan, again, is more than glad to learn from other countries, as it was yesterday mentioned by my president. And we're also ready to share our experience as well, to share our challenges with the international community. With such a thinking, we also considered that Azerbaijan could be one of the appropriate places to host World Urban Forum, to learn from the international community and to ensure to share our experiences in a post-conflict rehabilitation and post-conflict reconstruction. But unfortunately, in some other parts of the world, including in our region, but we see the new wars and conflicts are emerging, are happening. We see in front of the eyes destruction of the cities and human settlements. Under such conditions, again, Azerbaijan is ready to learn and to share its experience. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I'm going to try something. Teşekkürler. Thank you very, very much. Yes, please, by all means, thank you so much. And thank you for making a point for being, here with us today, and also for your hospitality in this beautiful city of Baku. We really, really appreciate you being with us today. So let's now resume our panel, but before we do so, I just want to give you a quick reminder to scan the QR code that's right here behind me. Please do so, because this session is really yours as well. We are very keen to hear your comments or maybe your questions for our panelists here. So do so, and we really look forward to see what you have to share with us today. So with that, let's resume, and our next segment will be in Spanish, so get your headsets ready, because I'm now turning to you, Vice Minister Bello. So Colombia has been advancing integrated housing, land and territorial development policies. From your experience, what national reforms, particularly around data systems, planning tools or institutional coordination, have been most critical to translating global housing commitments into concrete delivery on the ground?
Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Yo creo que todo muy complacida de estar acá en este panel como representante de Latinoamérica. De verdad, es un honor para mí como colombiana. Segundo, pues a dar respuesta a tu pregunta, pues quisiera hacer un poco referencia a un hito muy importante que marcó nuestro país, y fue la firma del Acuerdo de Paz. Nosotros firmamos un acuerdo de paz en el año 2016 con la guerrilla de las FARC. Y uno de los puntos de este acuerdo de paz es el punto de la reforma agraria integral, que habla de la redistribución de tierras. Y para poder empezar como país a lograr este reto de redistribución de tierra, el cual ha sido, o sea, el tema del acaparamiento de tierra fue uno de los motivos principales de la violencia que vivió el país, se necesitaba una información precisa, no se sabía quién era el dueño de la tierra ni dónde estaba la tierra. Entonces un factor muy importante fue la implementación del catastro multipropósito para poder identificar la tierra, y ahí sí empezar a hablar de redistribución aparejado con programas de vivienda. Hoy hemos avanzado significativamente en la implementación de ese catastro multipropósito y paralelamente como país estamos avanzando, sobre todo en este último lapso de periodo, en la redistribución de tierras. A través de la Agencia de Tierras hemos entregado tierras a los campesinos que fueron desplazados. A través de sentencias también muchas víctimas del conflicto obtuvieron sentencias de restitución de tierras porque fueron desplazados por los actores armados del conflicto, y hemos llegado también en conjunto con programas de vivienda sobre una tierra ya titular. Otro tema muy importante que estamos manejando en nuestro programa de gobierno ha sido el tema de lo urbano, del ordenamiento territorial alrededor del agua. Esta ha sido una bandera que se propuso el actual presidente cuando fue alcalde de la ciudad de Bogotá y que hoy lo trajo a consideración en nuestro programa de gobierno y nuestro plan de desarrollo. Lo que queremos es que nuestras urbes se organicen y se planifiquen alrededor de nuestras cuencas hidrográficas, un poco dándole la mirada a estos temas de resiliencia, adaptación al cambio climático y viéndole la importancia de cómo, si como ciudades o como asentamientos conocemos desde dónde captamos el agua, a dónde va, cómo tratamos nuestros residuos sólidos, podemos organizar hacia dónde va a crecer la ciudad de manera sostenible, porque de ninguna manera lo que queremos es lo que queremos precisamente es que haya un equilibrio entre el crecimiento sostenido de la ciudad y el cuidado de nuestra biodiversidad. Entonces, digamos, para la primera parte de esta pregunta te contesto, tenemos estos dos instrumentos muy importantes. El segundo depende mucho de la voluntad política de las entidades territoriales, pero hemos avanzado. El cambio climático también nos ha demostrado y le ha demostrado a nuestras autoridades la importancia de la planificación. Lastimosamente, muchas veces a través de los desastres nos damos cuenta de la necesidad de esto. Y por último, pues estas experiencias las estamos tratando de recoger en compañía con ONU Habitat. Estamos creando un observatorio del hábitat, del cual queremos generar un capítulo muy especial, que es el hábitat popular. Como política de vivienda en nuestro país, lo popular siempre fue invisible. Nunca se le había dado esa mirada y esa importancia a el crecimiento de los sectores informales, siempre se había visto como un problema, y hoy lo que queremos es acompañar a estas familias que generalmente son las más vulnerables y las que están más expuestas a afectaciones por cambio climático, que tengan todo el acompañamiento y la estrategia desde la política pública, sin que ello implique pues llegar a imponer, porque todo ha sido o quiere ser concertado con las mismas comunidades. Entonces, en ese sentido estamos trabajando en el país con estos sistemas de información y con el trabajo concertado con la comunidad y gestionado directamente por las propias comunidades. Esa es la bandera de nuestro gobierno, que esperamos que el próximo gobierno, ya que vamos a tener próximamente en Colombia un cambio de gobierno, pueda retomar estos temas y darle continuidad, y para eso consideramos que ONU Habitat es un aliado estratégico en la materia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. For sharing some of those powerful tools, and also for mentioning how access to land, its redistribution is absolutely key for some of the most vulnerable communities here on the planet. Thank you very, very much. Let me now turn to you, Mr. Shang, because let's bring the global financial architect's view. Which innovative financing approaches best complement coalition-based efforts to ensure housing investments are inclusive, climate-aligned, and scalable? And I would kindly ask you as well to stick to the 3 minutes period that we all have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, 3 minutes. First of all, I really want to congratulate UN Habitat for raising housing as a sort of important issue. It's a really important agenda. In the World Bank, we have been working on a housing agenda for many, many years with many partners, including Colombia, including Kenya, and many other countries. And now we have a renewed focus on jobs. And housing is really important for jobs. Our study done by Kathy Lynch and others is showing about globally, about 15% of the global GDP is related to housing, both investment and housing consumption. So that translates into jobs. But also, more than that, where the housing location is, has really strong determinant on the access to jobs. A lot of people cannot access jobs because they cannot afford the housing that's close to the jobs. So it's really sort of important agenda. From World Bank perspective, we work on housing on three sides. One is how to increasing the financing, because housing needs long-term financing. The second part is how to improve the policies which block the financing and the supply of housing. And the third part is how to increase the supply of housing, which include the land issues, infrastructure, services, and the developer industry. So that whole sort of value chain housing issue, that's something that we need to work on all these things together. So it's a complicated sort of issue. On some of the innovative things that you suggested, recently we're focusing on really how to use limited multilateral financing to mobilize more private sector financing. So one example is working in Brazil, we're working with Caixa, the development bank. So looking at how do we use both from the World Bank side and IFC, where we have financing to the government and the private sector financing to mobilize altogether $400 million of our financing mobilized through the government's the Eco Invest program, mobilizing I think 3 billion additional financing. So that's the kind of thing that we are looking at. Similarly, we are working in Africa. We have the Africa Green Resilient Inclusive Housing De-Risking Facility, where we channel IDA's concessional financing through the Eastern and the Southern Africa Trade and Development Bank. This deploys catalytic de-risking products across in the housing value chain. And with $95 million IDA financing, the facility aims to crowding $440 million in total private capital. So working public-private, leveraging private capital, that's one of the main things that we are working.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhang. Thank you very much for setting that question further. You mentioned Africa, and I think that's a perfect transition to go to you, Your Worship. Let's look at the front lines where the rubber meets the road, I want to say, because you are working at that front line in a city where there are many challenges and all these housing commitments, that's where they either make it or break it, that's at the city. So as a mayor working at the front line, where are, according to you, the biggest capacity, what are they, or system gaps that cities face in planning, delivering, and monitoring adequate housing, particularly in fast-growing urban areas? And I also want to remind you that you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for this opportunity. And as His Excellency Ambassador has said that you can't build a house alone. At least you need teamwork. Now, for me as a mayor of City of Windhoek, actually, City of Windhoek have confronted a rapid urban growth. That's now, we have people that are coming in from rural area for green pasture within the city. But then, in order for us now to arrest the housing, especially the effectiveness of it, we are looking at the 3 pillars. That's now the township establishment, so that we can be able to increase servicing. That one part of it is that we are approaching that so that we can be able to delay the township and establish them until we full actually service it in a bulk way. And then number three is actually we have to do what we normally do is for the community engagement and co-production. That means that we are also dealing with the communities so that they can be able to do also the planning that will also then involve NGOs and informal settlement, because most of our people, the most populated area is they are living in informal settlement. So we have them to make sure that they have decent house. So that's why we have to engage with them so that we can be able not to remove them where they have settled, but then to make sure that we service them and make sure that they have a decent housing. And then the other part is the public land release for affordable housing. On that one, the city provides several municipal land for low-cost housing, so that at least those people who cannot be able to afford, they can be able then also to afford and have housing at the lower price. That is now the low-cost housing. That's how we mitigate on that one, so that at least they can be able to have a roof on their head. In terms of the mechanism, we are looking at a few things of that we are moving from pilot projects where we have to make sure that the delivery, and we are required actually 3 things for the national government, where and also global partners they have to involve. That is also one that have to do with integrated data platforms, where we need to share even data systems, and because that will help also then connect land records, because if you are just giving out land to people to do it, but you don't have a record, then you won't do it. You can't be able to have a data in terms of how many residents that you have allocated land and how many that are still in need of land. And then we are also looking at the blended finance and project preparation support, whereby we are looking at that the city cannot access capital of scales, but then we are also looking at the bankable projects so that at least can then arrest the wrecking and the return margins that are lower when it comes to bank. And also we also need technical assistance to structure township establishment so that most of these housing projects can be able to move forward. And in fact, when we are looking at the blended finance facilities, it can also reduce investment risk in terms of increment of housing, which means that UN Habitat or the African Bank, Development Bank, and guaranteed from national treasuries transfer or have role to play in this initiative. So, and then the last one we also have in the formal partnership models with PROs that have to deal with that national statutory provisions that clearly define the responsibility of the city. So, where we have a national housing ministry and private partners that have then also to come in so that they can join hand with us in order to make sure that we mitigate the housing. I think with that, that's what we have for now.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. Thank you. And finally, turning to you, Jonathan Redford. So, Habitat for Humanity has been driving for affordable, accessible housing for several decades now. So, based on this long-term perspective, where do you see current windows of opportunity for strengthening the impact of the Global Housing Coalition and also promoting new financing pathways?
Thank you, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It's an honor to be with all of you today. I think we're seeing an historic shift right now. The bad news is that the gap between what it costs to create or improve housing and what families can afford is the widest in modern history. The opportunity that may come from that is at local, national, and global levels now, housing, maybe for the first time that I can remember, is at the top of agendas. And that creates an opportunity for us for action. However, with that greater political attention, it's overwhelmingly domestic in nature. Housing is not yet treated as a priority within international development. And this is a critical gap. As a global housing organization now marking 50 years and operating in more than 60 countries, we see the consequences of that gap every day. Last year, we did a detailed review of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's Development Assistance Committee and their creditor reporting system, the database that tracks foreign assistance commitments and transactions. And we found 3 concerning findings. First, housing is not yet understood as a catalyst for development impact. We know it is, but we need to broaden the tent and understanding. The creditor reporting system still includes slum clearance as an acceptable practice under the definition of low-cost housing, an outdated and harmful framing that we're working to change, but which will require strong member state support. Second, less than 1% of official overseas development assistance, or ODA, is directed towards housing and slum upgrading. For a sector that underpins poverty reduction, health outcomes, climate adaptation, and economic opportunity, this level of investment is profoundly insufficient. And third, when we applied a large language model to analyze the entire creditor reporting system database, we found that many housing-related investments are not classified as housing at all. This means that housing is not only underfunded, it is in many ways statistically invisible. This lack of clarity is precisely why we developed the Global Housing Continuum, a framework designed to provide governments, international financial institutions, housing stakeholders, and development partners with a shared language for understanding and financing housing systems. The Continuum officially launches today at 4 o'clock in Multipurpose Room 11, and we welcome all of you to join us to learn more. We must also recognize the significance of the Belém call to action, championed by France, Brazil, and Kenya at COP30 last year. It represents a critical political opening for housing. It calls for integrating housing into climate strategies, establishing an alliance of IFIs and MDBs, and importantly, for the first time, acknowledges the need to recognize housing within ODA. We hope more governments will engage with this agenda and help translate these commitments into concrete action. Finally, the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group remains an essential, though underfunded, platform for advancing global dialogue on housing. The recommendations being prepared for the 2029 must include clear frameworks, actionable guidance, and strong member state endorsements. The EWG has the potential to serve as the institutional anchor for sustained progress if it is adequately supported.